Hey everyone, welcome to MuseThemes.com. This is Ashton again. Today we have a new design widget for you called our Big Box Menu Widget. It's a very versatile full-screen lightbox menu widget with some extra finesse added in and works great across all breakpoints and on any screen size. On our live demo here, I can click our hamburger icon to trigger the menu, and I get a light box with some eye-popping navigation links, social media prompts, and disclaimer text here on the bottom, all of which is fully customizable, of course. This is especially a great option for those of you who want to save space on your site or your home page. In many cases, you may have a large full-screen hero image or background video on your home page, and you may not want to clog up the real estate with a bunch of navigation items, especially if your site has numerous pages. Alternatively, you may just want to use it as a more compact mobile menu for those smaller breakpoints. Now, when you download this widget, you're also going to get two additional widgets from our library included, which are what are adding to the effects that we're seeing here. One of which is our Onload Animator. So let me close this menu and reopen it so we can take another look at the onload effect. Once I trigger it, we get a really cool but subtle upwards animation of the nav text, which is awesome. Also included is our scaling text widget, which is allowing this nav text to scale up and down to fit all browser sizes nicely, as you can see while I shrink the browser down. So lots to work with here, but setup is very simple, so let's just jump right into Muse. Now some of you may be questioning the reason for the existence of this kind of widget option, considering that we already have widgets like Pushy Panes and VersaSlide in the library, which are both full-screen navigation menu widgets as well. While those widgets are certainly more powerful with more customization options such as trigger options, customized load direction, etc., they're also much heavier widgets to have on your page, and they take over a lot of the positioning power in Muse. So depending on your page, you could possibly have a higher risk for widget conflicts, especially ones that affect page positioning. This widget here is intended for those that want exactly what it does and don't necessarily need all the extra options found in those other widgets. So contrary to those other widgets which are coded from scratch by our developers using HTML, this widget is what's called a design widget, which means it uses a pre-existing widget from the default Muse library, in this case a composition, and styles that up to make a nice full-screen navigation. So a good understanding of compositions will go a long way here. Now I'm not going to cover too much composition basics here, but rather going to focus on how you can customize aspects of this to make it your own. The other perk of this design widget setup is that all the designing and customization is done right here on the Muse canvas, in contrast to widgets like Pushy Panes, where much of the styling is done either in the settings panels or on other pages of your site. So anyway, without further ado, let's get cracking. In our library here, we've already imported the widget. And remember, since this is a design widget, not a toolbox widget, you're going to find this listed under the nav section of your library, just in case you have a big list and are having a hard time finding it. Now, as we expand our options, you can see we have three different versions of the widget: center, left, and right. And these are referring to where the nav text is going to be placed in your lightbox. Now, they're all fully customizable, but these are just set up to work a little bit better in each of those particular configurations, so it saves you some time. We just saw the center version just now in the live demo, so let's drag that one out. And right off the bat, we can see a hamburger menu icon, along with some other widgets included that I mentioned earlier. Now with everything still selected, I'm going to slide this right up so the hamburger icon sits nicely in the top left corner, leaving all the rest of the elements off canvas. Now like I said, this is our center configuration. This one, along with the left option, are set default to be in this top left corner. But if you're going to be using the right side version, just remember that you're going to get a mirrored version of this, and it should be placed in the top right corner. And since we're using the center option, this hamburger icon could really sit on either side of the page. So now that we're positioned, you can just select the hamburger and move that to the other side if you wish. Just make sure to adjust the pinning settings to be in the proper corner. But for right now, we'll leave everything set on the left. Now the really awesome thing about this is that it's ready to go right out of the box. Now I'll just mention as well that you should make sure that your page width is unlocked, as noted up here by these outward pointing arrows. With the use of the scaling text widget, you're going to want to allow the text boxes to continue expanding responsively beyond the highest breakpoint to avoid any line breaking of text. So now the Onload Animator and scaling text widgets are already linked up to the proper graphic styles for the menu items and close buttons, so we can just give this a browser preview right off the bat and see this thing in motion. Awesome. So we'll click our hamburger icon, and we get our nice onload animations, and everything is scaling nicely. So let's switch back over to Muse. If you're familiar with compositions, you know that this hamburger element here represents the composition as a whole. So all we have to do is click on it once, and we get our prompt here with this blue icon to expand the settings panel. But before I do that, I just want to mention that this hamburger itself is fully customizable as well. This trigger here of this composition kind of acts like a state button, and it sort of sucks in whatever you drop into it. In this case, we have 3 black rectangles grouped together sitting inside. So if you want, you can click a few times into this and select any of these individually, and you could change the fill color in your fill menu if you choose. Or you can remove it completely and drop some text in there that says something like menu or whatever you want. Okay, so let's jump into that settings panel now. And by default, as you can see, the lightbox itself isn't visible, but all you have to do to toggle that on is by going down here and selecting Show Widget Parts While Editing. You can toggle this on and off at any time, and you're going to probably want to toggle it back off after making revisions so that it's out of the way. So now with our menu visible, you can edit anything inside of here. Now before you move around too much, it's recommended that you make small changes in preview in a browser often. It's going to make it easier to revert something back if you happen to mess something up. So as always with compositions, there are several layers of elements going on here. This encompassing area is your target, and within it are groups of individual items. So just pay attention to what exactly you're selecting when clicking, as you'll need to click several times to access some of these specific elements. A really cool tip though, when you hover over things, that little tooltip that pops up next to your cursor will always tell you what the next click will select, which is really helpful. So let's go ahead and just make a couple of small changes. Let's say I wanted to change these About and Work navigations to say something else. So I'll just have to click in a few times until I have my text tool open in the individual text box. And I can just start typing. So let's make this one say Widgets. And we can make this one Themes. Now, since these elements are just simply text boxes, you are going to need to assign your hyperlinks manually. So just make sure to select each of these boxes individually, like so, and visiting your Hyperlinks menu here on the top to assign a destination. Now let's add a menu item. Really simple way to do this. I'm just going to select this contact text box by itself, and then we can hold down the Alt key on our keyboard or Option on a Mac. We can click and hold and drag downward and release the mouse. And there. And by doing it this way, we retain the style that is applied to the text already, and also ensures that it's already linked up properly to the Onload Animator and scaling text widgets. And we could type something new for this one. Let's say something like extras. Now, depending on how many buttons you do add, you may need to play around with the positioning and/or the font sizes, but remember that the text will scale. And since we used that duplication method, everything is still grouped together, so it's pretty much good to go. So from there, everything else is pretty much customizable the same way, and you're welcome to remove things completely or even drop in new graphics, images, and/or text boxes as you wish. And even the close button is customizable as well. Just like the trigger, it acts like its own little state button. So right now, all you're seeing is 2 little white rectangles that have been dropped in and rotated. But you're of course welcome to change the size or color of that, or replace it with something else completely if you choose. And I'll also note too to make sure you visit each of your breakpoints after making revisions and make any necessary adjustments or realignments as needed, as sometimes things tend to move around a bit among breakpoints. Now once we're finished, we can select the composition once again as a whole, pop open that settings panel again, and we can toggle off the Show Widget Parts While Editing option. And very last thing I'll mention here are these actual Onload Animator and scaling text widgets specifically. These are of course optional. All they're doing is adding an effect to the content that's already in place. So by removing these, the menu will still function. You're just going to be missing those scaling and motion effects on all the elements, but the menu will still be there. And if you do find that something isn't animating properly, just make sure that it has the correct graphic or paragraph style set up, which you can always see labeled on each of these widget elements here. But if you like the default settings, you don't even really have to mess with these at all. But you can of course customize their behavior inside their panels. I definitely recommend checking out the full tutorials on these widgets specifically in our library if you haven't already. So let's give this one more preview just for closure. Click our hamburger. And there we go. We see our revised text boxes and all the same effects are applied as they should be. So thanks again for catching us on this new widget release, and if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to let us know. Thanks again.